How's it going, everybody? Welcome to Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions. Today, it is my absolute pleasure to get to talk to the legendary Christopher Priest. How are you, sir?
I'm doing terrific, Omar. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to Nick and everybody over at Dynamite for helping set this up to talk about this upcoming project you got that I can't wait to talk about, and to talk about your whole history in comics and how important you were to people, not just my age. I want to say younger than me too, that got into comics through a lot of your works. It's surreal to have you on the show. You're one of the few creators that I've never had a chance to meet personally. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, thanks for asking me, and it's about time.
It's
I
about
mean, I'm around. It's really not that big a deal. But thank you very much. I
Well,
appreciate it.
it's a big deal to me because I've been a big fan of your work. I'm one of the people that push big push for the Christopher Priest Black Panther omnibus. So I'm glad we got not one but two coming out next year. So I'm really happy about that. And I love seeing your work collected in these big oversized formats. And you and I were talking about that before we got started live. The big omnibus from Deathstroke from DC Comics. That thing is humongous, man.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it was 50. We did a 50 issue run on
Yeah.
that book, and I thought it was kind of like getting your second at bat, in a career, because I had been out of the business almost a decade when DC called me up and started discussing Deathstroke with me.
Hmm.
So this was just kind of uh, it's kind of like LeVar Burton does Roots, and for a while he can't get arrested because he's been typecast as Kunta Kinte, and then someone takes a chance and casts him in Star Trek: The Next Generation, which was the only reason why a lot of us, and I don't just mean black people, I just mean with a lot of people, because there was a lot of angst against the Next Generation. People didn't like the idea of them recasting and reshaping
Oh,
that platform. But I was like, hey, LeVar Burton, let's check this out. let's check this out. So I feel like I'm having my LeVar Burton moment where just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. My
well,
Al Pacino Godfather 3 moment, I guess you could say.
well, I'm glad they did. I'm serious because I left comics like a lot of people my age in my late teens, early 20s. I went to college, found other hobbies, but eventually I came back to comics, and it was amazing to see your name on Black Panther. And I told you this before we even started live that yeah, I've been following your work for years. There was this story that you did, Spider-Man versus Wolverine, right?
Hmm.
And when we didn't have the internet, I was growing up, so I didn't even know that it was the same guy that was writing the Black Panther run in 1998 until a little bit later, right? Like whenever I found, oh, it's the same writer. Jim
Sure.
and Chris are the same guy. That this is the
Yeah.
same guy that did I love that Spider-Man versus Wolverine story. That's the one that
It's maybe the best story I've ever written. I've been trying for 37, 38 years to write a better story. And it was I think that I'm a better writer now. I think I'm a better wordsmith, that I could probably, take another pass at that script and polish it up a bit in terms of just the poetry and in terms of the narrative and so forth. But as far as the construction of the story itself and it being really true to the characters, to both Spider-Man and Wolverine, it was just it was me and Mark Bright trying to take our shot and go, all right, we need to show the world, or at least show Marvel what we could do, and we were swinging for the fences, and we both gave everything, or gave it our very best shot, and you know what? Did not help us at all. Not one little bit. They sold a ton of these things. I
Mhm.
mean, I got a royalty check that I could just buy a car with. I mean, this thing just sold like anybody's business. But the chatter around the office was, well, it wasn't them. It was Spider-Man and Wolverine. Anybody could write a Spider-Man versus Wolverine and sell a bunch of copies, so they never gave us a chance to do a second shot. We were never invited to do any of Marvel's top, projects. And we were just kind of consigned to, the lower decks, I guess, but I thought that we did a good job. And I thought that that job, among others, uh, really should have qualified us to move on to bigger and better things. And what I've discovered in my years in the business is, I've always operated under this faulty assumption that if you do good detailed work and if you do your best and do a good job at it, that at some point quality will out, that people will recognize that good job and they will reward that effort, and you will be promoted along the chain of command, and you'll eventually somebody will say, hey, Christopher, why don't you come in and write the X-Men? Nobody ever invited me to write the X-Men. I'm still waiting on that call.
You're waiting on that. You're waiting on that call?
I've been waiting on that call for years, but what I've discovered is that it's more along the lines of everything being cyclical and what's particularly in vogue at the moment, and basically which clubhouse you're a member of, and who you're connected to, and and that sort of thing. Real briefly, I had a friend of mine who was a phenomenal pianist and gospel organist, and he was a writer and a producer, and he created this mass choir in New Jersey, and we went all over the New York tri-state area, just slaying people. And we were like the opening act for Take Six and the opening act for Vanessa Bell Armstrong and so forth. And a lot of times the main act, like John P. Key, could not follow us because Daryl, rest his soul, would go out there with the choir and just wreck the joint. I mean, that whole thing about the Time was like a band that Prince created, so that Prince could do some of his quote unquote black music, his urban music, through them, Morris Day and those guys. Yeah. But I've been to shows with where the Time opened for Prince, and Prince was having a hard time following them, and that was Daryl and his choir. This music was phenomenal. And when we get off the air, I'll get your address. I'll send you a CD, of this stuff. I'll show you how good this guy was. And he never got a break. And it had nothing to do with his talent. There's a million bands out there that are incredibly talented. There's a million artists and writers out there that are incredibly talented. I got into the business because I was in the right place at the right time. And I met a very tall man named Jim Shooter who took a chance with me. And that's a rarity for someone to do that in any line of work. But that's the fact, is that I just happened to be in the room. And back to Spider-Man Wolverine, I happened to be in the room at the editorial meeting where Jim Shooter is furious with the editors because we're not living up to our potential, and we should be making more use of the characters, and we should be doing things like, and he just off the top of his head, is it something like Spider-Man versus Wolverine? And he spins around and points to me and he goes, Jim, go do that book. I was the Spider-Man editor. So he goes, Jim, go do that book. And I wisely, the one wise thing I ever said in 45 years in this business was I said, well, Jim, actually, I'd rather write that than edit it. And he spun around to Anderson. He goes, fine, Jim, you write it and you edit it. And Ann had this look on her face like, what? Because Ann never in her life would have chosen me for that assignment. She would have called Chris, God bless him, and Chris would have done a wonderful job, and that would have been the end of it. But it was one of the serendipitous moments, and that's the only way I ever got a shot at a major book like that. So it has to do with you in the room with the right combination, the right formula of people who are in the room at that time. And unfortunately, that's an unfortunate truth about any business, but most especially this one. Sorry, I'm ranting. Go ahead.
No. This is a story I love hearing, because if you hadn't said anything and just kept doing your daily task of editing, who knows?
You wouldn't get anywhere. Right.
Yeah. Who knows where you would have been? You probably, like a lot of comic creators would have ended up leaving the industry and going on to something else.
I left the industry twice. I left it in '88,
They
and then I
pulled you
left it
back,
in huh?
but they pulled you back somehow.
Yeah, yeah. Well, comics have always been sort of a passion for me, but it's easy to get burned out.
Mhm.
And when I just started to feel like, well, I'm getting nowhere fast. And so in the '80s, I forget why I stepped away in the '80s, but I got fed up, I think, at some point. And I went off and I started driving a bus. And I really enjoyed driving a bus. And I really regret at this moment that I gave that job up. And then Mike Gold, who was a director level, he was one of the bosses at DC at the time. He pulled
Mhm.
me back in for an experimental group that he's putting together, and I enjoyed that job a lot because that was a whole different gig. It wasn't like just, well, we're going to edit Iron Man every month. It was like we are the R&D department, and our job was to think outside the box and create stuff that no one had ever seen before, and that was a whole lot of fun. Um, and then in the early 2000s, the early aughts, uh, I was writing Captain America and the Falcon,
Mhm.
and Captain America had a second book that was at Marvel Knights, and the Marvel Knights book ended, and they wanted to just consolidate it into one Captain America book. And I was doing this book with and now I'm having a senior moment.
Okay.
And please forgive me. His name will come back to me, but fairly big talented artist, But he and I were doing this book, and we were doing really good work on this book. And I thought, well, here's our shot. We're going to be moved over to we're the guys left standing. We're going to move over to the Captain America book. And Marvel decided to hire Ed Brubaker, who's a terrific writer. I got nothing against Ed. They hired a terrific guy to do the Captain America book. Um, and then they decided to take Captain America out of our book and relaunch it as the Falcon. And I felt like I had just been demoted, and I just said, well, I'm just fed up, and I just threw my hands up and said, you know, uh, I got to get the industry to stop thinking about me as a black writer. I'm a writer who happens to be black, but I can write anything, and I don't want to be limited to only writing African American characters. So
I remember those.
yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Those were
Right.
the interviews that from you that I read in several magazines that have always stuck out. Um, when it came to writing black characters, you felt like you could write so much more. Why not give you books like Superman, instead of just giving you books like Falcon at Marvel, right? And I thought that was such a good stance on, because I feel like I've talked to like some female creators that have been also typecasted to just write female characters, and it's I mean, I think things have come a lot further, or at least I like to think we've come farther than that. But
Well, I think we're evolving out of it. I think for a while, both DC and Marvel, they weren't hiring writers so much as they were casting writers, and they're
mhm,
like, okay, we have a Chinese lesbian character. We need a Chinese lesbian writer to write this Chinese lesbian character, which is just a complete misnomer. The main requirement, uh, and this kind of flies in the face of wokeness, but the main requirement of being a good writer is that you be the master or mistress of that particular universe. That whatever it is you're trying to write, that you write what you know, and you write it from a place of authenticity. Like The Wire, one of the greatest TV shows
yeah,
ever done, was written by like two middle-aged white guys.
yeah, David
You
Tennant,
know,
big fan of that book too. That's good. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. But I mean, there's a lot of truth in that book, right? Like, and in the
right?
series. I'm sorry,
Yes,
phenomenal series. Um,
yes.
in the
You
streets of
know,
Baltimore and all that, and the corruption in the system and all that. Um,
yeah.
I
But
think,
but they could also put voices to these characters, to Latino characters and African American characters, to transgender characters, gay characters, without them necessarily being any of those things themselves. It's just that they are writing it from a place, from an informed place, from a respectful place, and I think that that's something that writers are like actors. We just become the characters, and we guide the characters along.
Mhm. So you're getting a lot of praise for a lot of your books and some of the things that I've mentioned, but I do need to make this point right here. Right here. It's from Andrew. Please inform Mr. Priest that recently finished the entire run. I can definitely say that volumes 7 and 8 are the best parts of Conan, the original Marvel years. Right. Hey, everybody praises you for, your Black Panther. I was gonna go off. I was gonna go on the Ray. I love Ray. Like, Ray was one of my favorite stories, and that doesn't get enough praise. But I'm pretty sure most of the time it's Deathstroke and Black Panther and Spider-Man versus Wolverine that you get praise for.
It's
Yeah,
funny that the
Conan.
Spider-Man Wolverine book that shows up almost everywhere I go. That I've been
Mhm,
doing a bunch of shows, and every show I go to, that book shows up, and people start telling me stories about how they, in their early comics reading, that was part of their formative, experience. The Conan thing, I have to laugh about it because I just thought I wrote a dreadful Conan, and I didn't think I even figured out who he was until just before I got fired, and I was working with a wonderfully talented man named Val Semix,
Oh, yeah.
and
Great art.
Val, he took over after John Buscema left, and
Sure.
I think that early on people were not very enthusiastic about about Val, because Val had this sort of John Byrne vibe, and he was still
Mhm,
kind of figuring it out, figuring out how to do this job. But skip ahead, 20 or so issues, and then he kind of became really enamored of Barry Windsor Smith, and he started doing this sort of John Byrne meets Barry Windsor Smith stuff with this incredible detail, and he's drawing these vistas, and he's got all these ideas, and he's really opening up the world. And Omar, when I see what an artist can do, it just encourages me to stretch, because I go, oh, well, now that I see he can do that, well, let me throw this at him and see what, and swinging back to Vampirella here, I'm working with a guy named Ergon Gunduz,
mhm,
who, yeah, he is from Turkey. He's Turkish, um, and I wasn't familiar with him, and I didn't know his work very well. But he works in almost like an animated style, like these look like animation cells, and he does this wonderful thing with color, and he just kept surprising me, and he kept just exceeding expectations to the point where uh, I started writing things into the script. Like I said, and then we cut to Lilith, who is trapped inside the Gravat, and the Gravat is like this giant monster, this giant beast, and they would imprison the Vampiri by forcing the beast to swallow them whole, and she would be trapped inside the belly of this Gravat. Now, I didn't know what a Gravat looked like. I just made that up. I said, Gravat, go. Who the hell knows what a Gravat is? And I just completely relied on Ergun, as I do now, to just use his wonderful imagination and let him tell me what this world is, and who's in it. And he did not disappoint. He's, oh my gosh, every time his pages come in, I just have to sit back and giggle myself. I just have a little giggle party when I see what he came up with. Hang on just 1 second, because I'm starting to roast here.
It's okay, sir. So we'll be talking about his Vampirella. It's getting a big anniversary.
Yeah, I just had to talk to my Amazon Echo for a minute to turn the thermostat down, because I'm, yeah.
So
All
you
right.
you you mentioned Vampirella. So let's talk a
Yes.
little bit about that, because we mentioned the big two, Marvel and DC, the works that you've done there, and we'll get to some of the viewers' questions here in a little bit. And there's a lot of praise for you, by the way, lots of praises, and rightly so.
Oh, that's really embarrassing, but thank you. Okay.
But it's true. It's true. You deserve it. You've been in the industry for decades, and you deserve the praise that you're getting. The Vampirella story. You've been at it for quite some time now.
Yes, I have.
How did that even, was that in your radar? Like, or was this like Dynamite was
No,
like,
that was Nick Barucci. I mean, Nick was hounding me for almost a year, And I would get emails from him, and then I get phone calls from him, and hey, buddy, what's going on? And I'm like, what do you want? And he would start talking about Vampirella. I go, Vampirella? What? And I just, uh, I had nothing positive or negative to think about the character. I just, and I was usually typically pretty busy because Deathstroke was shipping twice a month in those days.
Yes.
So we were doing 2 issues of Deathstroke a month, plus I was doing all this ancillary stuff, and I was doing some projects at Marvel, and I'm like, what? What? So it was really his persistence. And then he found out that I was going to be at a convention at Mohegan Sun, which is like Northern Connecticut, I believe.
Did he show up?
And he drove up. Yeah, he drove 5 hours because he heard I was going to be there. So I'm at my table. I think I was either packing up or I was getting ready to leave, and it's a tap on my shoulder. And I turn around, and oh my God, it's Nick Barucci. And I went, are you kidding me? Are you still on this Vampirella thing? Really? So I said I'd consider it, and then the idea, like, this is how it works for me. I'm a character guy. Some writers are plot guys. Like Scott Snyder is a great plot guy, which is not to say he can't write character. It's not a zero sum. He's a wonderful writer, but he is a magnificent plot guy. Here is the big monster coming, and here's like the subplots, and here's how it all comes together. And his construction is magnificent, and he does all that stuff. I'm a character guy. I am much less interested in the plot, and my plots are usually pretty awful. I think a friend of mine said, with Priest, plot is not king. It's more like the 5th son of the Archduke, or whatever, and he's pretty lame, because like I'm writing a Superman book. I'm writing Superman Lost. Spoiler alert, at the end of the series, we find him. So I'm writing Superman Lost, and when you read that book, people will assume that it's a book about this guy being lost in space for 10 issues, and that he meets a Martian and the Silver Surfer, and he fights Galactus or whatever, and maybe it's like he goes back to War World or whatever. And the book has nothing to do with that. The book is about like there was a film called Coming Home in the 70s, which is about a Vietnam vet who returns home, and it's about the trouble he has re-entering his life. So Superman has gone through this thing, and the thing, the cosmic adventure, the lost part, I could care less about that. That's not even the interesting part about it. Although there's fun stuff, there's dolphins, there's stuff going on, but the story, he's back home before the end of issue number 1, because the series is not about him being lost. The series is about how this threatens his relationship with Lois Lane, and how Clark Kent goes back to work and he can't remember what he used to do there. Everybody, he looks around. He's only been gone for like 3 days, but he's had this whole experience, like this inner light, the Star Trek thing, the inner light thing, where he's had a lifetime of experiences in these 3 days. And so it's only been 3 days. It's only been a few hours that he's been gone, but to him, he's been gone for 20 years. So he's back at work, but it's like he hasn't been here in 20 years. So he's sitting at his desk, and Jimmy Olsen comes over, and here's Perry, and these people are ghosts to him, and it's threatening his relationship. And so it's all about character. It's about these characters, and it's about Lois Lane getting her man back, and Superman, trying to remember who he was and why he did this, and reclaim his place in the space in the world. Okay, so when you ask me about Deathstroke, or you ask me about Vampirella, my thought races to how much trouble can I get in with this character, and where can I go and dig around in, and with Deathstroke, it tickled my fancy to mold him sort of out of the Hugh Laurie character, House MD. If you ever saw that show,
yes, sir.
So to me, Deathstroke is House MD with a machine gun, You know, like you give that acerbic guy, you know, deadly weapons and turn him loose. You know, like the Deathstroke book was not about the world's greatest assassin. The Deathstroke book was about the world's worst dad. It was a book about a father trying to a guy who loves and wants to be loved, but is capable of neither. You know,
Mhm.
so similarly, Vampirella is about a young woman trying to make it on her own in the big city, but she happens to be a vampire from outer space, and that complicates things. That complicates things.
So
You know,
how long
go
have you
ahead.
been working on how long have you been working on Vampirella now then?
I
Since Nick
think
approached you and you did your first issue?
I want to say he corralled me in 2018 or 2019. I think it was
Mhm,
18. And my assignment was to do a run for her 50th anniversary. So we agreed on 12 issues. We extended it to 25.
mhm.
I ended it on the 25th issue because I did not want the series to get canceled with issue 36 and a half. I didn't want to suddenly, I would rather be asked back than to be asked to leave, you know. So I said, well, let's end that there. And then I pitched a couple of miniseries thinking that they were going to recast the book and relaunch with a new creative team. Um, but they really didn't have to do that because they do several different Vampirella books. So they had different creative teams working on Vampirella, and Nick still wanted Ergun and I to continue. So we did like a number of different miniseries, and concluding with Vampirella Dracula Rage, which is shipping now, which is
Mhm.
where she's like Beyonce and you know, in the Lemonade film, you know, where she's really pissed off. I'm pissed off. I have fangs. I'm coming for you. You know, and you know, so on the other side of that, I said, well, what are we doing on the other side of that? You know, and there was some discussion, and they were like, well, we want to just return to a monthly Vampirella monthly. We want you guys to continue, which is just flattering. I would have fired me a long time ago, but they were like, well, we want you to keep going, and I said, okay, you know, let's keep going, and that's what we're here. You know, that's what where we are now. Where we're getting ready to restart the series, and the idea came through uh, Mark. I think it started with Nick Barucci himself, but it certainly went through their marketing department. You know, like if we're going back to that monthly format,
Yeah.
what number would we be at? You know, and the rough estimates came out somewhere around 666, and they was like, well, here we go, Vampirella 666. You know, and you know, that was, you know, where the idea for that numbering scheme, that's where that came from.
And Axel, it is Dynamite. Dynamite is the publisher of Vampirella right now. That's where Christopher Priest has been writing the character for the last few years. And I see people asking the Vampirella Priest omnibus when? That's a good question. You've written enough material.
They're doing it.
And
I was asked about it by the publisher
mhm.
about 3 weeks ago, because they were like, well, we need to know where in continuity does this story land? Does this land before this story or after this story? So I'm getting those kind of questions. So I don't have a publication date, but I know that they're doing it.
Well, I will have to reach out to Nick and make sure it's in a big, large, oversized format.
Now, what I'd like to do, and I hate to put you on the spot here because
Go ahead. Go ahead.
we're apparently live, so there's maybe five whole people paying attention to me right now.
A
Um,
lot more than that.
what I what I would like to do if there's a way is uh I don't know. Did I send you like this little sampler, this little PDF that's like 5 or 6 pages of our Vampirella series? Did I send that to you?
Nick, or actually, I think it was somebody did send it to me. Oh no, it wasn't. It wasn't. Sorry about that. It was the Declan Shalvey one. No, sir, I didn't get that.
All right. Okay. So here's the thing.
What do you want to put on the spot? I'm on the spot. Let's do it.
I would just like you to like post it somewhere where people can read it. on your blog, on your web page, or or
Okay.
on this YouTube, or a link on this YouTube video. Here's the thing, Omar. Uh, there's this thing about judging books by its cover, and Vampirella has long had a tradition of having these cheesecakey covers. These very sort of suggestive covers, the edgy covers on them.
Hmm.
Um, that and people tend to, and much like Deathstroke, with Deathstroke, I kept fighting the publisher with Deathstroke. Please stop putting Deathstroke on the cover with a bloody sword. That's not what this book is about. We're trying to get people, readers. They only have so much money to spend, and you're trying to lure, come here, little reader, come here, and you're dropping breadcrumbs, and you're trying to lure a little squirrel to come in and to come in and read your comic book, and you got bloody sword man, cheesecake, TNA, cheesecake, and I'm like,
Ah,
so what I've done just as an experiment is I've sent, like, these I think they're 5 or 6 random pages from our run to as a sampler. Here, take a look at this. This is what our book is about. It's about this single girl trying to make it in the big city. Okay. And it's poignant, it's funny, is it scary? I don't really think it's all that scary. I'm a terrible horror writer. It's not, if you're looking for Crypto Cthulhu, look elsewhere. That's not what this book is, but every person that I've ever shown these pages to has responded with, wow, I didn't know that was what the book was about, because it just never occurred to them to read it because they assume they know what's in there. And just like the Deathstroke book is not about the guy with the bloody sword, this is not necessarily about, Satan or TNA. It has a lot of heart, it has a lot of depth to it. And it's incredibly funny in places. And I know that sounds immodest, but I'm trying to get people past the cover to actually see what the book is about, because most people, anyone who doesn't read Vampirella, uh, probably doesn't read Vampirella because they assume they know what the book is about because they've never gotten past the cover. And I would like to get them. I would like Dynamite to print at least one issue with a blank cover when there's nothing on the cover. Like, here, stop, being held up by the cover and actually see, how charming this book is and how great this guy is who's drawing it.
okay. Well, I'll tell you what. After the interview is over, you feel free to send me however many pages you want, and as long as it's okay with Dynamite and Nick, I'll be happy to post those on our social media to share, to give people a taste of what your Vampirella run is like and what to expect.
I'm sure it'll be fine with them. There's no spoilers. There's nothing in here that would undermine, anything that we're doing coming up. You don't need to know anything about the character. Just download the PDF, check out these few pages, and go, oh, that's what this book is about. For example, Omar,
Yes, sir.
everyone was telling me how great this HBO show was called 6 Feet Under, and I never watched 6 Feet Under because I just assumed it was about zombies.
Based on the title or the cover of the coffin?
Based on the key art for it was like a cemetery. It was like
Yeah,
it
yeah,
had this
yeah. It
sort
was
of.
a tree with like a cemetery. I remember that.
I never watched it, and then one day I got stupid bored, and I think I was reading an article or something, and somebody wrote something about this series, and I was like, huh. And I sampled the series. I actually said, okay, I'm going to watch this thing. I'm not a big zombie fan. No offense to you zombie fans. Okay. But all right, let's see what this is about. And I
Mhm.
6 Feet Under, and I was just blown away. I was like, wow, I had a completely different, a complete misconception about what the show is about. Obviously, it's about a family who runs a business, a funeral business, but the show is not about death or zombies, any more than Vampirella is necessarily about TNA and bloody hell and things like that. So
Well,
anyway,
okay. Now that you made that comparison, I like that. That's a really good way of putting it. By the way, yes, 6 Feet Under has
I'm
one of the most
desperate to get people.
beautiful endings of any TV show out there.
Yes, absolutely. And Omar, I can completely accept if people read this and go, okay, now I get it, but it's still not my cup of tea. Fine. I completely accept that. It just bothers me if people are rejecting us on spec without having actually sampled. This is a terrific book. This guy who's drawn it he's kind of an acquired taste because he's not a superhero artist. But
Mhm.
if you like Paper Girls, I'm not comparing myself to Mr. Vaughn, who is a wonderful writer, and these are wonderful artists that he's working with on Saga and Paper Girls and stuff like that. But Vampirella is not that far away from what they're doing. That's what I'm trying to
Okay, then I will be happy to post that stuff, sir. That it would be
say.
an honor because, well,
I just put you on the spot.
I think it's not putting me on the spot. I mean, because we do live in a, I mean, it's those times again where people are now collecting covers, right? Like people that
Yeah.
speculate, not just speculators, but also people that are like, oh, I like that cover. And then there are definitely people that collect covers that never open up the comic book. They're just like, I think
Yes.
it's got pretty artwork. I don't know
Yep.
anything about the comic book, but I just collect it because I like the artist, or I think it's got a beautiful woman on it, or a hot dude's butt. Whatever it is, they just collect covers. Um, and I think that's why I tend to go toward, or why I initially started going towards the collected edition route, because covers didn't matter to me. It's not like I was putting the
But they're
cover.
in there. The
They are
covers are
all
in the
in there. Yes,
collected
sir.
edition.
Yes,
Yes.
sir. They're
Yeah.
all in there. But
Yeah.
back to my point is, like, I think that probably has a lot to do with it. It's like, okay, this is the cover that we have to choose for this book because sometimes the cover sells the book. Um, I would, yeah, I would definitely love to see help you spread the word of what your Vampirella book is like.
I'm a guy who just uh I spend all day trying to find ways to make you laugh or make you cry or make you think or educate you a little bit. I'm a big West Wing fan, and almost every episode of West Wing, I learned something. It was kind of education, edutainment, whatever, however you want to put it. And with the Superman Lost book, I have a friend of mine who is an honest to gosh physicist, and anything in there that sounds even remotely right was due to him, was his input, because I run it by him and go, give me some jargon here, give me some language here. Anything that sounds real stupid, that was all me, because I ran out of time and I had to put in, like, okay, then he hit him with a zeta beam, that kind of thing. But yeah, Omar, it's like, uh, 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 that's who I am. I'm a character guy. I remember reading Frank Miller Daredevil, and I knew Frank. I knew Frank before Frank was Frank. I knew Frank when he was the skinny kid who was kind of hiding in Denny O'Neill's office, and Denny would take him to, like, these really bad, off-brand karate movies. And I got to
Oh, my
tag
friend was
along,
a big fan of those movies. Yeah.
and I got to tag along a few times with those guys. So once Frank started, I was privileged to be working at the company as Frank sort of developed from this new guy who was doing these little backup features to being the artist on Daredevil to being the god of Daredevil. But I remember, I was always a big Denny O'Neil fan, and Denny was kind of my model. Denny O'Neil, David Michelinie. There was a few other guys, to a certain extent, Roger Stern, who were just really big influences with me. But then this guy Frank, here's Frank Miller, and Frank is like doing this incredible stuff with Daredevil. And I remember I would some of those issues. I would finish reading an issue of Frank's Daredevil, and I would just be exhausted. And I'd put the comic book down, and I would go, "Holy crap!" Well, I can't say what I would say, but I
You
would say,
go ahead and say
"Holy
whatever you
something."
want to. You're Christopher Priest, sir.
Yeah, right. But I'm a minister. I can't say, "Rah!" I'm not supposed to anyway. But
Yes,
you get to my point, that where you would put that book down, and you'd have to kind of compose yourself for a minute. Now the last time I felt like that, I've read a lot of good comics. I read a lot of bad comics. Is I had a friend of mine force me, almost at gunpoint, he bought me the first paperback of Paper Girls, the Brian K. Vaughan book, and I was absolutely blown away. And
I didn't
just
know you were
the,
a fan. That's
the
cool.
pacing of that, the characterization,
Mhm.
and so when I'm doing the Vampirella book, to a certain extent, I kind of feel like I've been let out of jail, because when you're working for the majors, a lot of times you're working in this incredible pressure cooker and you're turning out a lot of material in a short period of time. And now the crossover, where now you have to figure out a reason for Banana Man to get involved with something that has absolutely nothing to do with him, and all those sorts of things, that are important to that particular process. But over here at Dynamite, under the auspices and the blessing of our great father, Nick Barucci, uh, I've been given almost completely free reign, an unprecedented amount of creative freedom. Where Matt Idelson, the editor, and I, it's very rare for Dynamite to step in and say, "No, you can't do that." So, I'm able to kind of experiment. I'm able to kind of go, huh, and learn from these guys, from the new guys. I can learn from Scott Snyder. I can learn from Brian Vaughn. I can learn from well, I can name a whole bunch of people. Ta-Nehisi is out there, and all these other guys, and I can just go, huh? Let's do some experimental stuff. So it's been a real privilege, and they pay me occasionally, so that helps. That's helpful too.
So oh my gosh, we got so many questions in the chat. I'll promise I will pick some out. You were also an editor for a long time at Marvel Comics.
Yes, it was.
And with that role, how is it that, like, going from that to writing the comic books, like, how did you see that as a difference? Like, did you see the things that you would have pointed out as an editor, like, before you sent the editor your script, or did it help being an editor first and a writer second?
Well, actually, I think I was kind of a freelancer first,
Mhm.
freelancing for Larry Hama, and then became officially on staff as his assistant. So I had some experience, and even while I was on staff, I was writing the whole time for Larry
Mhm.
Hama, first for Crazy Magazine, then the Conan stuff. Um, uh, as an editor, I will tell you, it was a different time. The times now are very different. Now everyone's very deferential to the talent, and I think they're far too nice to me. They're nicer to me than they need to be, but they're very nice to me. I wasn't that nice. I was not nice. But you have to understand, it was the '80s. There was no internet. Um, for me to wait on a rewrite meant that I had to wait for you to type it on your typewriter, right?
Oh,
And you
right.
had to either fax it into the office, or you had to run down to FedEx. Which is what I did with a floppy disk. Remember floppy disk? We had to take a floppy disk down to FedEx. I can't tell you how many. I must have. I probably threatened lots of lives, like speeding to FedEx to bring this floppy disk so I could get it into the
Yeah,
office.
kids these days have no idea.
No, they really don't. So I saw my position, or my responsibility, to be the editor and the head writer. So if I had time and if I could send it back to the writer, like Peter David worked like 3 doors down the hall from me, so that was easy. But somebody who lived in Alaska, or who lived like in California, there was no time, and I would just go and rewrite them, as needed. And I didn't think anything of it. I'm like, you know, uh, it's comics. We just didn't take it that seriously. Now, as a writer, um, I don't know how it feels. I think when I was working with Alex Antone, we were doing Deathstroke together, and there were times when Alex said, "Well, this line would be better if he said thus and so," and I was like, "Sure, I don't care." I think at first it was a little bumpy, but after a while, Alex got the rhythm and the tone of my voice, and I trusted him if he needed to go in and just. I'm like, don't waste time, just go do it. And on Superman, I'm working with Brittany Holzer. Oops, she has a new last name now. I'm sorry, Brittany. But I'm working with Brittany, and Brittany used to be Alex Antone's assistant. So she, cut her teeth on dealing with me and my peculiar ways. And she's someone I trust without question. I just, I don't even know why she's bothering me, because she'll send me an email going, "Hey, would it be okay if we did that? Why are you bothering me?" I completely trust her go and edit. Be my guest. Go and edit. So it's been an interesting experience, but it helps that you have had experience on both sides of the desk, because I have a lot of empathy for what
Yeah.
the editors are dealing with and the pressures that they're dealing with.
Nick is just jumping in to say thanks for doing this interview. It is my absolute pleasure. Believe me, Christopher can always come back here anytime, and I ain't kicking him out. I'm just saying.
Hello, master.
But he did share the story of how he got that that Vampirella gig. You drove 4 hours, Nick. You're nuts. That's awesome. I love it. I love hearing that. And I think what you said is really important. Like, I think it does help to have the role of an editor in mind when you're writing, and vice versa, right? Because you do speak the truth. Like, things are different now, right? Editors' positions are a lot different now than they were back in the 80s.
And their job is a lot harder. They have less. They have more resources because they have the internet and they have digital, which to manipulate the art and the writing. But they're also under siege constantly because the companies are constantly asking them to do more with less. And they have the Twitterverse to deal with because they're coming after us. I mean, and a lot of times we're being besieged by people who don't actually support us, who actually don't read our books, but they're loud mouthing us on Twitter or these other platforms, and therefore, the editors are just, man, it's much tougher to be an editor now. I mean, I got away with stuff that I could never get away with.
Okay, the good editor question: has Dynamite ever said no, you can't do that on the Vampirella book? Because you said they gave you some free reign, right? Like, to do what you
No,
want.
they never have. I self-censored myself on Vampirella Zero. This was a preview issue that was put out for Free Comic Book Day. It was just an 8-page story to introduce our new series. And I wisely and stupidly, I don't know why I did this. I decided, okay, that I'm going to write 8 pages that take place like around issue 3. So we're coming right in the middle of the story, and there's all these characters, and there's this little pudgy girl, and why are we looking at the little pudgy girl? What do we care about her? And the little pudgy girl, she looks in the mirror and she sees herself as Vampirella, and what we're doing is we're riffing on the whole idea of objectivity and sexism. That little girls imagine themselves to be, these dancers on the rap videos. I mean, that kind of thing. So it's that kind of commentary. But anyway, the story is narrated by a rat. There's a rat character in the book. He's a talking rat named Stan, and Stan has a real acerbic sense of humor. And Stan made a remark that is certainly that I will not repeat, because I don't want to take I don't want people saying Priest said this. I didn't say it. The rat said it. Okay. And and everybody at Dynamite realized that, and they were willing to go ahead to go to press with it. But I said that I didn't want our very first pages out of the box to become a distraction over a throwaway line by a smart aleck rat. So I nixed that line. They didn't ask me to, but I did. But other than that, the only clashes we've had at Dynamite is is just confusion over, can we show a butt or not? I don't care either way. Just tell me, because we put the butt in there, and then we get a note back. Well, you got to cover the bare backside, so we put a fern in the foreground, so you don't see the, but sometimes the butt ends up in print, and sometimes it doesn't. And I'm like, well, which is it? I mean, what's the point of you making this sort of a big deal about, that it's I guess teen plus or whatever it is? Omar, I don't know about you, but when I was a teen, I'd seen lots of butts when I was a teen, and I cussed like a sailor when I was a teen.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Who are they protecting? Seriously.
Well, let me tell you, and I know everybody knows this. Like, even when I was, well before the age I could buy mature books, I was buying mature books, because there was always somebody selling comics somewhere. And it's like, yeah, sure, whatever, man. I don't care what you buy, kid.
And was there anything in there that was shocking to you as a young person?
I'm trying to think. No, because I didn't go for like the obscure, like the
Serious
actual
underground. Yeah.
right. You
Yeah.
know, it was like the zines and stuff like that, or real indie stuff. Not really. Nothing that I hadn't already seen on TV that I probably shouldn't have been watching to begin with.
Every now and then, Jim Warren would let. By the way, I'm really apologize for this lighting. I just bought a new light, and it's not working here. And I'm like, okay, he's light now. He's very dark. Okay, so I'm sorry
It
about
looked
that.
great. It looked good. It looked
Anyway,
good.
Jim Warren, the publisher, the original publisher of Vampirella,
Yes, sir.
who was a real interesting character himself, but that's a tale for another day. But Jim Warren would every now and then he'd let slip a nipple, and I'd be
Yeah.
reading Vampirella and I go, oh, there's a nipple, and I'd be like, it's like the prize in the Cracker Jack box, it's like, hey, there's a nipple. The nipple has made its appearance,
Yeah, I would feel like that.
It did not scar me for life, Omar. I'm still here. I made it. Stop it already.
I mean, that's a very Western thing, though, right? Like, I mean, manga has been doing that for years, but they have their own kind of censoring too.
Yeah.
But over here, it seems like no, let's, no,
Yeah.
no butts, but it's okay
Yeah.
for like decapitation and stuff.
Yeah, blood can fly as much as you want, but oh boy, cover that nipple.
But let me tell you,
cover
man,
that butt crack.
Like, I don't even know what, like, I have two little girls, 14 and oh my gosh, I have a 12-year-old now. And I'm like, I mean, they're good kids, and I'm like, but they have access to to the internet too, and I'm like,
oh my god, yes.
Like, can you imagine being when we were young? Like, oh man, I'm gonna go to the comic book store and try
What
to
is this wee crap? I'm way older than you, but I understand what you're saying.
Well, you look great. You look great. All right, I
got
gotta
a little Barack Obama going here, so
that's that just shows you just
character. It's character.
I've always heard that. Yes. All right, I gotta ask some questions here.
Sure.
Let me just pick some out.
I'll keep it short. Sorry, I ramble.
No, dude, these are so good. It's good. Loving his Black Panther, Deathstroke, and loving his Superman Lost. This is just a lot of praises. We need more Priest Omnis. Where's my? Oh, there's somebody else that likes Ray. Yeah, man, I'm not alone. I told you, Ray, dude.
The Ray was supposed to be DC Spider-Man, and I'm kind of disappointed that after he left my care, that there wasn't more interest up there in developing that character, because he was the guy he was a young adult with the money problems, getting his first apartment, having his heart broken, he was a great character. Issues with his dad, I mean, come on, he's Spider-Man, and I don't know why. I would love to get my hands on the character again if DC ever sees fit.
Oh my gosh, I would love that.
I miss him.
That miniseries was one of my favorites, and then the ongoing. In your opinion, what was your favorite arc on your entire Deathstroke run? Did you have a favorite arc, sir?
I'd have to say it was probably the last part. I think the last section of the Deathstroke run. Well, first of all, I like the Deathstroke versus Superman, because the Superman editor put me in a box, because he was like, I'm sick and tired of all these people beating on Superman, because they just did something with Aquaman where Aquaman beat up Superman. He's like, well, now here you go beating up Superman. I said, I have no interest in beating up Superman. You don't understand the character of Deathstroke. Deathstroke can't beat up Superman. He wouldn't try to beat up Superman.
No,
so it's this Deathstroke issue number 7 and 8. Well, actually, it helps if you read 6 as well. 6, 7, and 8. But if you read that, you'll realize that he didn't beat Superman. He found a way to make Superman beat himself. He's just you write. I write Deathstroke like he's Bugs Bunny, and he would just Bugs Bunny would face these overwhelming challenges, and he would just find a way to make total asses out of all of them. But I think my favorite part of that series was ultimately the end, where the last series, which is Deathstroke R.I.P., where Deathstroke essentially fakes his own death. He appears to die, but he has actually moved into the Midwest somewhere and become a male nurse, and that was a lot of fun. that was just a lot of fun. And he took it very seriously. He was a good male nurse. Yes.
Let's see, we get some praises here. Just want to let Mr. Priest know how much I love his work and his blog. This Deathstroke Omnibus was one of the few blind purchases of my life, based solely on my love for the creator. With your name on it. Yes.
Thank you. That's very nice. Wow. God, this is embarrassing. Wow. Okay.
Oh, no. You stay for the praises. Here we go. What is your most reread prose book? Yeah, what's a book that you've read the most?
That I've reread the most?
Yes, sir.
I can't tell you because we decided not to talk about politics. You know.
Oh, okay. Yes, sir.
But it is a political book by
No, you don't have to say. You don't have to say. That's it.
No, I'm not going to say the title, but it's but I've read it like 4 or 5 times. Beyond that, wow, I'm having a real senior moment here.
It's okay. What about a comic?
No, wait. Let's stay with prose for a second. The creator of Justified, he did Get Shorty, he did Justified, he did a bunch of other things.
You're talking about the
Elmore Leonard.
Okay,
anything by Elmore Leonard. I love Elmore Leonard. So I have a bunch of novels on Kindle. They're written under James Priest, which is why nobody reads them. But they're on Kindle, and the particularly one is called 1999, which is kind of my self-contained superhero universe. So 1999 is written in Elmore Leonard's style, which is that kind of like he just kind of throws everything you ever learned in English class out the window, and he just goes, you know what, I'm going to just invent my own language. And he writes in this very natural dialogue. You know, people speak in broken sentences. I'm always fighting the proofreader at DC because they're always trying to correct me, and I'm going, no, that was right. No, because
that's how people speak. Yeah,
that's just how people speak. We sometimes we drop the subject of the sentence. Sometimes we drop the predicate of the sentence. Sometimes we interrupt. We speak in sentence fragments.
Sir.
I have Superman starting. He starts a sentence and he stops and he starts again. And they wanted to correct it or smooth it out. And I said, no. He's having a hard time getting through that sentence because it's an emotional moment. That's where the emotion comes across. So that's why I love Elmore Leonard. Anything that he did, I love that stuff. I love Bonfire of the Vanities. I've read this this Michael Jackson bio, and I can't remember what the title of it is. I'm sorry. I've read it like a dozen times. It's huge. Boat anchor of a book, very comprehensive, and it's very fair to him. It doesn't take sides, and it tells the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it's just an amazing book. But yeah, and now I'm reading Freddie. What is this? 5 Nights at Freddy's. I read with my granddaughter. I read with her every night.
I was going to say, you gotta have grandkids that are into that stuff.
5 Nights at Freddy's. Fazbear Frights. So we're on book 1. I'm trying to get her to read more. So I harass her. She's in a different time zone. So, it's 10 o'clock my time, but it's 8 o'clock her time. And, and I just have people hunt her down and say, time to read. And she's like, no. But once she gets going, once she gets cranked up, now I can't stop her. Now she's like, she's still turning pages. I'm like, okay, it's time for bed. No, a little more, so wish me luck. I'm trying to, get the youth of today to know what a book is.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I do the same thing to my kids. Like I said, I have a 12 and a 14-year-old.
But you got to read with them, not just read to them.
It's not just read to them. You got to read.
And you can't just tell them to read. Sit down. You get a copy. They get a copy. You do it a few pages. They do a few pages, and they'll get into it.
I got to.
You got to do the voices. You got to do the voices.
Yeah, you get to do. I love doing that.
Yeah.
We used to read a lot of like the young, like the little kiddie books, like what was it? Tiny Titans, and then Marvel had like the little Marvels and things like that.
Yep.
My kids knew their Teen Titans long before they knew their ABCs.
Wow.
And both of them are in advanced reading. Both of them. And both of them have read a lot of the Silver Age comics. Yeah, man, you got to read to the kids, and I mean, this is how it happens, right? It's not like the old school days with somebody stumbling into a store one day and picking up a
Yeah.
comic. I mean, we
Well, see,
gotta
in
pass
the
the
old
love.
days, the comics were on a spinner rack at 7-Eleven
Right
or at
down
Walgreens,
at the
or
bottom
they were
of
everywhere. So,
yeah.
but now you have to hunt them down. You have to make a special determined excursion to the comic book shop, which is, it's been good in the sense that it saved our industry, that our industry didn't go away because we developed, this network of retailers. But it's bad in that it's not like the general public are really exposed to what we do as much as they used to be once upon a time.
And I'm gonna get to a bunch of these questions. I promise you, Mr. Priest. I've been recommended your Black Panther run for years by my brother Omar here. Oh, Aaron, thank you. But I'm curious to hear from you. What would attract me to your Black Panther run? I'd love to read it. So, Aaron hasn't read it yet. I've been saying that it's good. So, I guess he's asking, how would you pitch it to him?
Well, not knowing Aaron and not knowing anything about him, it's very difficult for me to answer that question. So I
Mhm.
will tell you, when I was approached by Joe Quesada and Jimmy Palmiotti to work on the book, my first thought is, what narrative approach could I take to this book that would interest a mainstream comics fan in reading about essentially a black character, because black characters traditionally don't sell, and I wanted to just get out of that, that nosedive. And I thought, well, the only thing to do is to right up front to just, like, address the concerns of the uninitiated reader, just as I went on my rant about people who don't read Vampirella. Is like, people don't read Black Panther for the same reason, whether they assume they know what the book is about. So what I did is I took a character that I created when I was writing Kazar for Marvel, and it was
Mhm.
a character who worked for the U.S. State Department. His name was Everett K. Ross, and I
Showed
said,
up in the
well,
movie.
yeah. So I said, well, I'll do is I'll build my Black Panther. I will make him the keyhole character. So my Black Panther book, Aaron, is not really about the Black Panther. It's about Everett Ross, and it's about his cultural awakening, and it's about this white male, because comics have traditionally been produced by white males for white males. So I'm addressing that audience head on by making one of their own the lead character in the Black Panther, while the Panther himself in my book, and I would encourage you to start with the Marvel Knights Volume One. Start at the very beginning. Uh, my character was much more like the Christopher Nolan Batman. He was taciturn, mysterious. You never knew what he was going to do next. He wasn't the center of that universe or the center of that story. Although he was the driving force of the story. Everyone was talking about him. Everybody was thinking about him. Everybody was wondering, what is he going to do next? But he was this mysterious guy who would melt out of the shadows and snatch you up and throw you off a roof. I mean, he was not the family friendly, Chadwick Boseman character. He was a much more dangerous, scary guy. And the story was being narrated by this idiot named Everett Ross, who was styled after the late Matthew Perry, and or at least the late Matthew Perry's character in Friends. So he had that voice. Every time I wrote Everett Ross, I heard Chandler Bing in my head, and he had that sort of irreverent New York sense of humor. um, and what we did, particularly in the first 12 issues of the series, which is where you should begin, is we addressed every excuse a white fan would have for not reading this book, and we just exploded every stereotype with humor and warmth, and while at the same time making Black Panther as badass and as interesting as he had ever been. And I think that's the only reasons that I can offer you to read my interpretation of the Black Panther is that it's so unexpected. It's so not what you think it is. It is so much more fun than you could possibly think that it would be. And so is Vampirella. Sorry.
No,
I
we're
can't
gonna
help
go back.
myself.
We're gonna go back.
Silly.
We're gonna go back to that. We're gonna go back to
Yeah,
that.
that's okay.
Honestly, that is the way that I've always pitched it, right? It's not what people expect, and I don't want to spoil it for people. But I have to ask this follow-up question.
Sure.
It was always a thing I've heard, but I just wanted to hear it from you, sir. And that is the order of the story, the way that it's told in the first 6 issues, how it's out of order, kind of like Pulp Fiction. Was that your idea, or was that Joe Quesada's idea?
That was Joe Quesada's idea.
That's what I thought. Okay.
I was writing this series called Quantum and Woody. And Quantum and Woody was told out of sequence like that just because I'm an idiot and I was having fun doing it. I don't know why I started doing that with Quantum and Woody. But anyway, so I turned in the first issue of the Marvel Knights Black Panther, and Joe and Jimmy rejected it. So there's actually a script around here somewhere, if I could find it. The original script for Marvel Knights Black Panther #1, and it read like a Don McGregor story. Now, Don McGregor is a terrific writer. He's a legendary writer. He's a good friend of mine. I love Don McGregor a lot, and I was doing Don McGregor. Deep in the jungle lurks the dark cat as he stalks his prey, and and all sorts of stuff. And Joe's like, "What are you doing?" He says, "No. I want you to do what you did with the chapter headings, and tell them out of secret, and all that stuff." And I went, "Really?" So yeah, go back and do that. Part of the deal that I made with them for Black Panthers, I said, okay, #1, he can't get beat up anymore. I won't stand for it, because Black Panther, they just gotten to the point where I think some writers had started to confuse him with Tarzan. They were like, "Oh, he's Tarzan." No, he's not Tarzan. And his costume would get ripped every issue, and I guess that was dramatic to them. And and then he'd get beat up or thrown off a truck or whatever. Some kid comes behind him and hits him. Comes up behind Black Panther. Some kid. He's like 8 years old. Comes up behind Black Panther and clocks him with a rock and knocks him out. And I'm like, no, we're not doing that anymore. That can't happen anymore. If I'm going to write him, then he's got to be like this badass. He's going to be Marvel's Batman. He's going to be like that, this dark, mysterious, character. But the other end of that deal was like, and oh, by the way, it's going to be funny. And they just kind of like stopped in their tracks. It was like, funny, Black Panther's never been funny. And I went, yeah, and it hasn't really been funny since. I'm not really sure why people are afraid to put humor in the Black. I mean, they put it in the movie, but why are they afraid to put humor in the Black Panther? I was like, it's just you're taking it so serious that it becomes a little unbearable because it's just so serious. Why so serious? So I said, yeah, it's going to be funny. And Aaron, wherever you are, that's the other thing. Go read those first issues of Marvel Knights Black Panther. There's an awful lot of humor in there. Some of it quite racist. And for a while, they were afraid to reprint that stuff because Everett he would actually say things in that narration, in his narration, that are I could never get away with today because everybody's so sensitive with the thumbs and all that, with the Twitter, But yeah, he was. I mean, he goes in a Chinese restaurant and he starts like showing off, and he's talking like he's speaking Mandarin to the guy behind the counter, and the guy behind the counter keeps looking at Black Panther, going, What's he talking about? He doesn't understand him because he's not Chinese. The guy behind the counter is he's Filipino. Black Panther knows he's Filipino, so he starts talking to him in Tagalog. He starts talking to him in his own language. Black Panther starts talking to him in his own language. He goes, just ignore him. He's just, he hasn't had his medication yet. But it's that kind of irreverent, not politically correct stuff that could never happen today. Marvel would never sign off on any of that today. So you got to go back and read that Marvel Knight stuff. It's good fun. You'll enjoy it.
My friend wanted to ask Mr. Priest if Charlie is referenced in Black Adam is a reference to Charlie Charlemagne in Spider-Man versus Wolverine.
Oh, that's very funny.
Any truth behind it?
Sure. I didn't think about it till just now, but sure. Now Charlie is a CIA operative that I modeled after Annette Bening's character in a film called The Siege. I love Annette Bening. I don't know Annette Bening personally, but I love every character she's played, and she was
She's great.
magnificent playing opposite Denzel Washington and Bruce Willis, and she was like this really smart CIA operative. And I wrote her into Black Adam, a series I wish I was still writing. I am so bummed that we didn't get to just I wanted to do at least 25 of those. I was having so much fun on that series.
Oh
Go.
man, I hate hearing when things get cut short like that.
It's a rough business right now, Omar. It's a very rough business.
I believe it, and I try to push all the books out there to people so they're aware.
Yeah.
Dear Mr. Priest, thank you for the super chat, Jack Ferry. Have you ever regretted anything about the Hobgoblin identity in the Spider-Man?
I regretted that, that I couldn't, go back to Marvel and choke Jim Salicrup. Jim Salicrup took over the Spider-Man books after I left. He's a good friend of mine. I love you, Jim. I hope you're out there somewhere. I bump into him all the time, and he's just the greatest guy and the most optimistic guy in the world. But honestly, when I was editing the Spider books, Tom DeFalco, I regarded him as the head writer. There was no official position. That's how I took it. That's how I treated him. That when we made our plans, Tom and Ron Friends, they were the anchor guys. They were in charge of the Hobgoblin thing. Roger Stern, who had left the Spider books and was no longer involved with the Spider books, Roger Stern was the only guy who who had the keys to all of the Hobgoblin stuff. So we'd run stuff by him to make sure that nothing we did would contradict, because only he knew who the Hobgoblin really was. So I didn't know, Tom didn't know, Ron didn't know, none of us knew. Okay. So when Jim took over, I'm not sure that anybody told Jim, by the way, you need to check in with Roger Stern before you do any Hobgoblin stuff, and then I think, it's been a long time. But somebody, it might have been Peter David, somebody wrote a story that revealed that Ned Leeds, who I killed off in Spider-Man Wolverine, that Ned Leeds had actually been the Hobgoblin. No, he was not. I knew he wasn't the Hobgoblin, but I got blamed with it. And every now and then I bump into Roger Stern somewhere, and I get the skunk eye from Roger, and I'm like, I didn't do it. I didn't work there anymore. I wasn't even there. So I don't know. I regret that I couldn't just go back and fix it, I guess, but sorry.
Oh man, I love hearing that, because after Stern, it was DeFalco that took over the run for a while.
Exactly. Yes.
And the whole mystery of the Hobgoblin, and oh my gosh.
But both Ron and I, both Tom and I, respected Roger enormously. I respected him as an editor, as a writer, as a friend. He was a good friend of mine. Well, he still is. I mean, he's still with us, for Christ's sake. I would never have jammed him up like that. That was totally stupid. I'm sorry. I'm looking for this book, because now I'm curious about what was the name of that book. Wait a minute. Let's go to on to the next question. I'm listening.
Okay, well, let me get this one right here, Mr. Priest. I just want to say that I love how you really dove into the Wilson family and Deathstroke in all its nuances. So thank you. That's a appreciation. Then,
and that's what the book was about. It, just like 6 Feet Under was about that family, Deathstroke was about, it was about this guy and his children and his ex-wife, who he obviously still loved, and it was kind of a family drama. It really wasn't about the bloody sword guy. Anyway, go ahead. Oh, by the way, the book I was thinking about, the Michael Jackson book, is called Untouchable, and it's like 1,000 pages. It's like 1,000 pages long, and it's incredibly comprehensive, and it's one of those things. And this is you know, the whole Michael Jackson thing is like a Shakespearean tragedy, because we are left with the mystery. Who was that guy? Was he in fact this child person, and this incredibly talented, child man, or was he some sort of monster, or was he a little bit of both? And to be honest with you, Omar, that's what good writing is about. Where I will write a story uh, on at least two different rails. So the fans are divided about what this scene means or what this character's motives ultimately were. And they could get online or get together in groups and debate that or have conversations about it. And that's what good writing is, when you create a complex character like that and a conundrum like that, where you go, wow, because you know what if this guy is truly innocent and we've all judged him so wrongly? Or what if this guy was some sort of monster and we've been covering for him? And it's going to trouble a lot of us who are Michael Jackson fans for the rest of our lives.
You mentioning that is the approach that you took, that at least to me it felt like, to Deathstroke. Deathstroke's a very complicated character. I mean,
Yeah.
he's done a lot of messed up things in the past. And of
Yeah.
course, DC can be like sweeping that under the rug and be like, hey, we had a crisis. This is a
Yeah.
new dude. This ain't the
Yeah.
same Deathstroke. This is a different Wade Wilson.
Yeah.
I mean,
I,
fans
I,
don't remember. So it had
I,
to be a task.
yeah, and I had similar arguments with DC over Black Adam because,
Hmm.
they not just DC, Marvel does it too, but DC really does it, where, you know, the villains tend to be sexier. Magneto and Hobgoblin for that
Savage Land
matter.
Magneto. Yes, sir.
They're sexier. But what happens is they start trying to round the corners off of the villains because, well, now that they're headlining or that they're the subject or the main subject, the reader starts to have some sort of the desire or demand that this character in some way perform in some way heroically. So, they wanted to reposition Black Adam as some sort of they wanted me to call him like an anti-hero, and I refused to. I said, no, the guy's a villain. Okay.
Yeah.
He destroyed a country, Omar. Game over. He's a villain. He's, and the theme that was running through my Black Adam story is there is no redemption for Black Adam, and he himself would say that, and that was repeated over and over again, and I was like at loggerheads with my editor and with other people up there who, I guess they want to, they're trying to launch a movie franchise and they're trying to reposition this character, in some way that they can kind of commercially exploit him, then
Yeah.
let's just say none of that stuff ever happened. But if it did happen, the guy's a villain, full stop. Sorry. And he's an, sorry, he's an asshole. Excuse my language, and I said, so I was trying to write Black Adam as like the asshole Thor of the DC universe, So he was kind of in that demigod status, and he was just this moron, but he struggled with his humanity. And spoiler alert, before the end of the series, what we did is we severed the the god half from the human half and gave him a sort of redemption, and now let's see where DC takes the character from here. But I honest to God wish I was still writing it. And yes, this is the kind of thing that I would do with Deathstroke. It would just, have those two different rails where, yes, he is this merciless assassin who really doesn't give a crap about anybody. Um, and then he's a male nurse. And I think I wrote that. Wrote that credibly.
It was
Where
excellent.
he seeks revenge off of somebody who murdered some innocent kids, and he goes after him, because those kids were brought into his ER.
Mhm.
So who is he? But at the end of the day, you get to the last issue of Deathstroke. Again, spoiler alert. You get to the last issue, and he's renounced evil, and he's back home with his family, and they're having a turkey dinner, and they're bringing out the roast, and it's one of those things that DC likes to do so much, where like everybody gets along and they join hands and they sing "Kumbaya" and the whole deal, you know. And then the wife goes into to the kitchen to bring out the turkey or whatever it is, and she comes out with the turkey, and he's gone. He's gone out the back door because he can't do it, Omar. He can't. He tried. He really can't. It's just not who he is. He pulls on the mask and he rushes off into the night, and that's how the Deathstroke series ends.
I think, and that happens a lot in, especially in the big two, right? Characters have been around for so many years, 30, 40 years. People want to add humanity to them. But I do like the idea that, pulling back and being like, no, at the end of the day, they're still monsters.
Well, it's a natural inclination, but it's like magnetism where you have this tension in the narrative. And I'm reading this, and since Deathstroke is the protagonist, we want to root for him and we want him to succeed. And the same thing with Magneto, where Claremont, really revolutionized comics.
Yes, sir.
By humanizing this character, because he wasn't, for years he was just a caricature. He was just a mustache twirling caricature. And then Chris said, well, no, hold it. Let's look at this guy and his history and figure out why he's this way and what his goals are. And now everybody's doing it. They did it with Lex Luthor and they did it with these other characters. So now everybody's doing. But I think it's fair to say that I believe Chris did it first. Maybe Stan with Dr. Doom. Stan certainly made a lot of.
He definitely humanized Dr. Doom. But
yes,
I think Chris brought it home with. I'm sorry, Mr. Claremont. With the with the whole addition of the tortured soul being a part of the Holocaust, seeing what happened to his wife and kids, that realization that when you yourself as the reader start questioning, you're like, oh, maybe I could side with Magneto. All these years I've been X-Men, right? And now it's like he ain't that far off.
I think that the trick is to not cross the line to the point where you cave into fan service and make the guy put an S on his chest and make him a hero. Magneto is not a Magneto. He is not.
No. You keep saying Magneto. I as soon as this interview's over, I gotta text my friend Phil. He's the only other person, and to this day, still calls him Magneto.
Oh, okay. Well, he is absolutely, whatever you pronounce his name, he's absolutely, not a hero. I mentioned parenthetically, by the way, that both Stan Lee, Roy Thomas, and Chris Claremont, the three major long-term X writers, made the center of their universe the romance between Scott and
Jean.
Jean, thank you. Oh God, see, I'm old. Scott and Jean. Why hasn't that translated to the features? Because the features, Scott could not be more boring, and I don't know why. And Scott was always kind of like the center of that universe, and he had all this gravitas that we were really interested in Scott. Even when Wolverine came along, and as Wolverine's bickering at Scott, and which was really interesting because everybody used to defer to Scott, and Wolverine could give a damn about Scott Summers. And I was like, "You go, Wolverine! You go! You tell Scott to go to hell!"
I think we were all like that. That's why we became Wolverine fans.
Certainly, Scott and Jean were the center of that universe. And then ultimately you had Wolverine sort of like forming out a triad there. I'm just wondering how they lost it in the feature, because they've never made an interesting X-Men movie, I think, that at least that had the emotional punch of the comics.
I think it's hard.
I know we're off subject here, but more about this stuff than I do.
I do. I love talk. I will talk to you about anything. But I think what they did was cash in on one character. Right. I mean, it is the guy with the claws. That if you're gonna go hard, you go hard on the guy with the claws, and everybody else kind of becomes.
But there was something magical about the Stan Lee X-Men, the Roy Thomas, Neil Adams X-Men, and certainly the Claremont X-Men.
Well, the Claremont era is the one that had the love triangle, right? Like it had the Dark Phoenix saga. That stuff is so.
Yeah, but Scott Jean, that was back in the Jack Kirby days.
Yeah. Yes,
that's always been there. Yeah,
that is true. But I mean. But Scott's a boring guy in the movies, right? There's no depth.
There's no reason for that. There's no reason for that. They should go back and read more. He's an interesting character.
Well, that's another type of video.
Anyway, back to the question. you go.
What are some of your fondest memories from working on Milestone? Because you mentioned that a little bit earlier.
I don't
When
have any fond memories working at Milestone. I never worked at Milestone. I was part of the partnership that was ultimately became Milestone. When I was with them, they were never named Milestone. We had a boring name that I came up with. We were Creative Partners Limited, which was just a dumb name, you know.
okay,
And it was like a prison sentence. It was Dwayne McDuffie, myself, Dennis Cowan, Derek Dingle, and we were all camped out in Dennis's apartment, uh, like under house arrest, for, I want to say we were pulling like, sometimes 12, sometimes 18-hour days, for like a year, where we were developing going through this development process and building out the universe and the characters. But then we also had to do the business part. So we were working with Dennis's, at the time, uh, you know what? I won't go there. We were working with someone from DC on the, doing the business part. Derek Dingle was leading that part, obviously, because he was the business partner. But it was an unbearable, ungodly amount of work. Uh, the If I have to look for a fun side, it's like, I got to spend time with some truly genius, creative people. Um, Certainly, Dwayne was a giant, both physically and figuratively, among us. And we just, if you ever seen the Friends TV show, we didn't have girls in the group. We didn't have, excuse me, women in the group. It was just, just us guys. But it was like, you could hear that theme music playing in the background, while we were just spending so much time together. Then, of course, all the wives were pissed at us. So,
because you were spending so much time together, coming up with these great stories and ideas. Oh, Dwayne was one of my favorites.
yeah.
One of the most. Oh my gosh, everything that he wrote, I was a big fan of. His Justice League run, while short, was still my favorite. I love that run. And no
Yeah.
offense to your Task Force or any of the Justice League that you did.
I wrote Justice League for a while too, pal.
I know.
But anyway, yeah, Dwayne was just, besides that, Dwayne had this enormous sense of humor, and this great wisdom. And there's lots of times when I would sit down and just, kind of pick his brain. Dwayne was also one of the few guys I ever met in life that you could win an argument with him, because he would argue with you to a certain point, where he realized either you were right, or that it was one of these things where you have become anger locked and you're just arguing for argument's sake. And he just didn't want to be part of that. But if he was actually wrong, if I could actually convince him that 2 and 2 equals 4, he would go, huh, you know what, you're right. And he'd stop fighting. And I'd never seen that before. I'd never, because usually our egos kick in and we get, I asked him once, I said, Wayne, if I was as smart as you, I don't know that I would be talking to anybody in this room, And so I asked him, how do you keep your ego under control? And I'll never forget what he said to me. And it was words that I try to live by. He said, Jim, my ego is so big that if I let it out, no one would ever want me in the room. I mean, he would be totally unlikable, because, he said words to the effect of, because I know I'm right. I without a shadow of a doubt that I'm right.
Oh man.
So he has, he says, like, I know the things that I'm good at. I know the things that I'm not good at, and he tries to take into account the fact that, you can't just go into every room and blow it up with all your intellectual farts. You have to leave space for other people to exist, within the zeitgeist of the room there. And he was very generous and very accommodating in that factor. And he really taught me a lot, because, Omar, I know for a fact I'm right. I know. My ego is at least as big as his. So there you go.
Gone too soon.
Yes.
Gone too soon. And leave,
Absolutely.
left the legacy for sure.
Mhm.
but I really liked hearing this. What you just said about him and you, and I wish more people were like that, willing to listen to each other when it comes to a difference of opinion and just listen. Because I think sometimes in life that's what we lack is that
Yeah.
listening to each other. Instead, you just want to talk over somebody and show your point and then get out.
Yeah, I can't tell you how much I respected that man and really loved him, and it was just delightful because I didn't know him until I mean Dennis was the center of that world.
Yeah.
Dennis
Mhm.
was the guy. He was the Professor X who made the call and recruited all these people, and most of us showed up. Some of us didn't. I won't name any names. No, I won't mention any names who were invited but didn't show up. A lot of them like joined in later and became writers or artists or whatever. But uh, uh, Dennis was very he spread a wide net, for that original call. So Dennis was the one who introduced me to Dwayne McDuffie and Derek Dingle. Michael Davis I had already known, and
Mhm.
Dennis and I have known each other since we were teenagers. So we've known each other a long
Let's see here. Thank you for the super chat, MV Maps. Omar, if you could ask, I'll definitely ask. What were some of your plans for Black Panther post issue 49 and the crew? And Captain America and the
time.
Falcon, if they had not been rebooted / canceled, thank you very much.
Okay, well, let's take the Black Panther first. It was time for me to go. I forgot what issue it is. Somebody will have to look it up. But there was an issue late in the run where I blasted the Black Panther into outer space. Black Panther in space. And then, I said to myself when I turned that script in that you have officially jumped the shark. You have officially run out of ideas. And at some point, Marvel insisted that we change the Black Panther into a different character, and that's how that whole Casper Cole thing that came to be. That wasn't my idea. I mean, it was my idea, but it was at the assistance of the company that we make the change. For Captain America and the Falcon, I'm not entirely sure, except that what I was doing with Captain America and the Falcon.
Bart Sears. Was it Bart Sears? Was he the artist that you were thinking of on Captain America and the Falcon?
No, it was.
I thought I had it.
It's on the tip. Yeah, it's on the tip of my tongue.
I'm
It'll come
starting
back
to.
to me.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
Uh,
Sorry.
uh, 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 hmm.
No, it's okay. I
Yeah,
can. I
it'll come back to me. But with Captain America and the Falcon, what I was doing there was I think I heard this story from Paul McCartney. Paul McCartney in some interview where he was talking about the difference between him and John Lennon, where Paul McCartney would sing like a line in the song, like you know, uh, uh, see, everything's getting much better, and then John would chime in and go, "It couldn't possibly get worse," So it was like these sort of diametrically opposed people, how they came about how they approached their creativity. And when I was doing Captain America and the Falcon, the I had them kind of working at cross purposes. Like for a long time, Falcon was handled very generically. He was just like, "Look, Batman, a giant roach," and so what, or he would go up to Harlem and fight some incredibly stereotypical, bad guys, But I just had like, the Falcon doing a lot of stuff behind Cap's back because he
Oh,
knew that Cap would never go for this, So he would be like, Cap would lay out the plan. Okay, here's the plan. We're going to do X, and then we'll do Y, then we'll do Z. And Falcon would be like, yes, that's right. So Cap would go off to do his part, and then Falcon would start doing some skeevy crap behind, and he would take some shortcuts, but things that Cap would never approve of, and that tension between how they approach the superhero thing was just fascinating to me. And he was such the Falcon was such a delight to write. And then ultimately I had to retcon all that, and it's a long story. It didn't end well. a lot of what happened toward the end of that series was kind of like we had to do that because we had to close up shop, and they were doing something called Avengers Disassembled because I had started this whole romance between Captain America and the Scarlet Witch,
Scarlet Witch, yeah.
which was like a lot of fun and just some of the best writing that I ever did for Marvel, and then they kind of forced me to say that, oh, she was under the influence of thus and so, and it really bothered me because I thought like, we got something here. But once again, it's like, well, the company was doing this big crossover and they were doing X, Y, and Z with Wanda, which really went nowhere. And, I think what we were doing was much more productive and much more interesting. But what can I tell you? When I'm king, Omar, I'm going to fix these people. I want to fix all of this stuff.
Well, I hope you remember me because I was
I hope they
I was nodding my head because I
Yeah.
was in agreement. Some people didn't like that era, but I get it,
Yep.
change up and all that stuff. So these were the artists: Joe Bennett, Andre DeVito.
There we go. Joe Bennett. He
Okay.
was absolutely wonderful. And the stuff he was doing for Cap and the Falcon, oh man, knocking my socks off. So good that they stole him and put him on the Hulk or whatever they did. And I
Yeah,
was
he ended
happy.
up on the Al Ewing's Hulk. Well, I never thought of a relationship between Wanda and Cap. That was solid. Solid. I remember that those covers by I think could have sworn Bart Sears worked on that too.
No, he worked on the first arc. So the
Okay, okay.
first 4 or 6 issues, whatever it was,
Any
there was a great cover of Captain America kissing the Scarlet Witch. That was Bennett, and that was an awesome cover. And
I remember that cover.
yeah, I actually bring posters of that when I go to conventions and go, hey, look at this here,
You have any fun stories with Quantum and Woody? And then I promise I won't keep you.
Oh,
Any
okay.
fun stories
I
during that
got
era?
nowhere to go.
Okay, well, I'm here all night.
Quantum and Woody.
That was the era of Valiant through Acclaim, right? When Acclaim had
Yes,
relaunched
yeah,
Valiant.
right. Yes, yes. The Acclaim had picked up the Valiant characters, but Fabian Nicieza asked me to create a superhero buddy book, something like Power Man and Iron Fist. And I said, well, if we're going to do something like Power Man and Iron Fist, why not get the guy who drew Power Man and Iron Fist? So we went out and we got Mark. And Mark was the one who said, well, okay, I'm in, but I don't want the black guy. We did this thing where Luke Cage was kind of histrionic and he was kind of the the joke guy, and Danny Rand, the Iron Fist, he was the straight guy, and Mark was like, well, I'm a little tired of that. I want the black, I want you to take the black guy seriously, and let's make the white guy the jerk or the goofy guy. So I thought, like, you mean kind of like Woody Harrelson and Wesley Snipes in White Man Can't Jump. And he's like, yeah, something like that. So I said, cool, doesn't bother me. So I built it around that idea, that dynamic. And when I was trying to come up with names, the black character, I named him after my neighbor. I had a neighbor named Eric who was a captain in the I don't think it was the Air Force, it was the Army. He was a captain in the Army, and he lived down the block from me. And he was like, he was taking himself and his life a little too seriously, so that's where Eric came from. I went, hey, let's call him Eric. And then I was trying to figure out what to call like the character that was based on Woody Harrelson, and I was like, let's call him Woody, So we just call him Woody, and you know, there's a lot of those types of stories, but the quick one is that Mark never really liked anything I did, and every issue I would turn the script in, and then I'd get the call, and it would be Mark complaining about the script, and he was like, why'd you do this and why'd you do that, and and I did this bit where they're interrogating somebody or they're doing something or meeting with the police or whatever they're doing, but they're in some building. And the meeting concluded, Quantum turns to Woody, goes, let's move, Woody, which is what he always said, let's move, Woody, and then Quantum, fires a bat line and he jumps out the window, and he goes out the window and he does this elaborate thing to swing down from the top of the building to the bottom of the building, and he gets in the car, and he's waiting in the car, and he's waiting, and then I do a whole page of panel by panel by panel of just Quantum sitting in the car waiting, which is like a gift to Mark because he doesn't have to redraw it. He just stats it,
Yeah, he's
just
just sitting
waiting,
there.
waiting, 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 waiting. And then finally in panel 6, here's Woody, and he comes and he gets in the car, and Quantum turns and looks and just stares at him. And Woody goes, "What?" He took the elevator. He's like, why would I jump out a window when I can take a smart look at elevator there? So that was one of these bits that, like, people loved that bit, and we got a lot of positive feedback on that bit. But Mark hated it. He just absolutely hated it. So finally, I think, somewhere in the middle of the series, I said, I am going to write a story that Mark will like. I'm going to take away I'm going to write something that he cannot possibly complain about. It's going to have action. It's going to have all the stuff that he likes. We're going to take Quantum very seriously. We're not going to make fun of Quantum. Okay. And I did everything that I know he's been asking me to do, or everything that he disliked. I took it out and I wrote this story. And I went, this is guaranteed. He's got to like this story, and I sent the story in, and after the editor, does his thing, the editor sends it to her thing. Excuse me. Our editor was female. She sent it to Mark. And then I get the call and he's complaining about the story. And I go, "Oh, you got to be kidding me." I said, "Mark, this has got everything you wanted. What are you talking about?" So it's the story where they're on the top of this mountain, is in a secret lab, and they're fighting the bad guys, and they get trapped inside some chamber or whatever, and the chamber blows up, and it blows up, and it blows them down. It blows them off the top of the mountain, and they end up skidding down the mountain, and they're skidding down the mountain, and they're out of control, and they're reaching for each other, and they're trying to grab hold of each other, and they skid off of this ledge here, and Quantum goes off into space, and Woody grabs a hold of the tree just at the last minute and reaches out his hand and grabs a hold of Quantum, which was stolen, by the way, by Christopher Nolan in Batman Begins. That whole bit where Batman and what's his name goes off the mountain, that is shot for shot taken from Quantum and Woody. Go back and look at it. It's shot for shot taken from our comic book. But anyway, so I said, how on earth could you not like that? Mark, I did everything that I, and he goes, yeah, but I hate drawing trees.
That was the excuse?
He hated the fact because they were sliding down a mountain. He had to draw all these trees. And I was like, I just shoot me now. Just shoot me now. So the dynamic between Quantum and Woody was, no kidding, it was us. And, at different times he'd be Quantum or I'd be Quantum, but we bickered the way they bicker. We were two guys who really loved each other, but, got on each other's nerves. It was comedic. It was, poignant. But yeah, that relationship was taken like literally from our actual relationship.
Oh man, I love hearing stories like that from behind the scenes, and how somebody as a writer and as a creator gets that kind of inspiration. Like, it really did happen. So you just put it onto paper.
Yeah.
I think that's amazing. That's amazing. Do you remember what comic? And I wanted to ask you this. What was the comic in your portfolio, or what was it about, that you showed Jim Shooter for your Marvel interview?
It's called The Stingray. It was a comic that I wrote and drew. I was a student at the what's now called the High School of Media Arts, I believe. It's on West 49th Street in Hell's Kitchen. At the time, it was called the New York School of Printing, although they had a journalism program. But they also, one side of the school was for journalists and one side of the school was for printers, which was weird. But, so we would print our own newspaper and so forth. So I knew how to do offset printing, and there was no digital print press in those days. But
not in those days.
We worked with hot type, like lead type that could burn you, and stuff like that. And so I actually I wrote it, I drew it. I was a huge Neil Adams fan. I wanted to draw like Neil. I wanted to write like Denny. I just worshipped Chris Claremont and Denny and those guys. So yeah, it was a 20-page comic book. It was the blue lines. Blue lines are a pre-press thing. It is a proof that you run off of the press to make sure that all the lines. It's not in color. It's just everything. It's just like it's a black and white comic, except that it's printed in blue ink. And it's just a proof to make sure that all the lines are actually coming through, or do you have to go back and retouch the plate? So I brought in this blue line. It was a 20-page comic, and it was I lettered it. It was bad lettering and bad. It was just bad. But it had a few chuckles. It had a few interesting lines of dialogue. Now, why Jim chose me over a room full of artists? There were like 4 or 5 artists who were looking for that internship. I really couldn't tell you, but I'm so grateful that he did. And I saw him a couple months ago and told him so. I've heard a lot of bitching and moaning about Jim Shooter, and attack me if you want to, but I think that 75 to 80% of the folks that do that really need to check themselves, because we are all making more money in this business because of Jim Shooter. We all have stronger or better or longer careers because of Jim Shooter, because of the innovations that Jim Shooter and Paul Levitz and people like that worked for. Was he perfect? No, of course not. But I think Jim Shooter was a guy who wanted to make comics better and have them come out on time. And and people just kind of resented that. And I understand. I was part of that sausage making process, and I would get churned up in it, and then I would churn people in response, because all that shit rolls downhill. But people waiting for me to say bad things about Jim Shooter will be waiting a very long time. And I think people who are saying bad things about Jim Shooter really ought to take a break and just I could never not be grateful to the man who gave me my career. That's just bottom line. And we should have more honor than we do about that.
Larry Hama said the exact same thing you did.
Because he trained me. Larry was my
I was going to say you were a good listener.
I sat in a room with this guy for years, and he has this real Bushido code about. He's the real thing. Larry's the real thing.
He's such an awesome guy to talk to. Like behind the scenes, we were talking about a lot of the stuff, and on camera on the interview, we talked about Jim Shooter. He kept it professional, but he said the exact same thing you just did, and I think that's really awesome. About speaking ill of Jim Shooter. He's like, you're never gonna catch me talking ill of him if it wasn't for him. Yeah. Very, very similar. That's very professional, man.
Yeah.
I heard. Okay, so MV Maps asking about Storm and the Children and Black Panther becoming a villain for a while. This is during the Black Panther run.
No, Storm and what?
And the Children, and becoming a villain in the Black Panther run.
No, I don't think that's me.
That was a Reggie Hudlin's run had Storm in it.
Yeah, well, I introduced. Well, Chris Claremont introduced the idea of Storm meeting Shala when he was a kid. I teased the idea of a romance, but much like the Ned Leeds thing in Spider-Man Wolverine, the point of the Ned Leeds thing was to that whole comic book was designed to explain why Peter and Mary Jane should never get together, and I won't go into depth with it, but that's what the point of that whole story was, that here's why Peter and Mary Jane should never get together, and then after I left, somebody turned that around and used that as a platform or a basis for them to get married, which was a total misinterpretation of the Spider-Man Wolverine story. Similarly with Storm and Black Panther, to me, these were two people who are in love with each other, but could never actually, take that step to get married, because it would complicate both their lives too much, and the type of people who they were. But it was one of these things where just whistle and I'll come running, and that's the relationship that they had. And then after I left, Reginald saw it another way, and Reginald is a good friend of mine, I don't know why people will go like, well, we have a difference of opinion. That means you hate him. No, I don't hate him. We just see it differently. But as I see Storm and Black Panther, I did not agree with the wedding. I thought we didn't get much mileage out of it. I don't know, this kind of stunt stuff, fans are smarter than we think they are. They can see through it, and you get a little temporary bump out of it, but now you've written yourself into a cul-de-sac. And I could not be more bored with Peter being married to Mary Jane, or Shala being married to Panther, or Superman being married to Lois Lane. It's just, no.
I was like Storm with Forge, but I'm an X-Men guy, so.
Yeah, but it just I think I was writing a more nuanced relationship. If you, Omar, have ever had a relationship with someone in your life that you have this great affection and even this great emotional attraction, but you have very different lives, you have different goals, or maybe you're married to somebody else or involved with somebody else, or whatever the story is, but there's some reason why you don't do it. And I have had that relationship with somebody that sadly is no longer with us, but I love this woman dearly. And if I had half a brain, I would have sacrificed and try to push to make that relationship more than it was. But instead, it was one of these, whistle and I'll come running. And I believe that we loved each other dearly, and I would have done anything for her, and she would have done anything for me. But the marriage and romance was just, for whatever reason, was not meant to be. But that tension, that emotional, romantic, sexual tension, that tension that was there, that's what's interesting to write. That's what's interesting to write. And
that's what you meant by. Okay. So
you take that tension away. Once they cross the threshold and Peter and MJ get back from their honeymoon, now you've destroyed that tension, and it's less interesting.
But would you say the same about like shows, the will they, won't they? And then when they finally do you think the show is over and they continue on writing the show for 6 more seasons? I mean, I think there are still stories to tell featuring.
Well, they got creative with like Ross and Rachel, on Friends.
We're going back to Friends.
We got a little creative there, and but like when Jeannie married Major Nelson, it was just like this they had nowhere to go. And when Daphne and Frasier's brother Niles, when Daphne and Niles got together on Frasier, once they actually got together, who cared? You don't want to catch the taxi, Omar. That's the point. You don't want to catch the taxi.
So it wasn't just Storm and T'Challa. It's just across the board. You didn't want people to be together.
I
don't want to put words in your mouth. I just want to make sure.
No, I understand. I really thought that what Stan was just amazing at was the soap opera stuff.
Nick talking about I Dream of Jeannie, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
What's a Genie?
I
think it was just this sort of.
Nick knows.
It was it's just that tension was what was interesting, and that's what people were tuning in every week to see. And then once you take that away, and Stan was just so good at writing that stuff, back to Gene and Scott and Peter and MJ.
Well, we had Reed and Sue long before any of that, right? And
Reed and Sue, yeah,
they're still
and there was always sort of threats to that interpersonal relationship, and it was always something that we could relate to, because all of us were either actually having those types of relationships or wishing we had those types of relationships.
I see what you mean. Okay. Well, it's a good thing that you are okay with people with a difference of opinion, because I like my MJ with my Peter. But I love your writing, so you can disagree with me, and that's okay. I still love you. I still love it, man. Omni Nation's giving a huge props to you. Thank you, Omni Nation, for the super chat. Hey, Omar, thanks for doing this. Christopher Priest, man, love your Deathstroke run so much. Your writing is amazing.
Thank you so much.
It's true. It's true. So when can we expect the Vampirella 666?
February. At least that's what I'm told. That's what I'm hearing.
Okay.
Nick Barucci, who is listening, he would know, so he could chime in here. And what we're doing is what I wanted to do. And
she ain't getting married, right? Is that ain't happening? She ain't getting married.
No. No, actually, yes. So what we're doing is what I wanted to do was go back to basics. I wanted to get back to what we were doing in our 50th anniversary run with Vampirella. Is I was kind of taking a note from Lena Dunham's HBO series Girls, which okay. I just loved. That, and then of course the Brian K. Vaughan Paper Girls series and some other things that I read that I thought was like, well, that's really interesting. But this sort of slice of life stuff, and
James is on top of it. Vampirella 666, February 7th, 2024. Thank you so much for that, buddy.
There you go.
That's my oracle.
James. So what I wanted, but as we go on with the series, so we started that, 3 years ago, whenever it was. So we started that, and then as the series went on, we met more characters, we added on more layers, we added on more complications, and now it's kind of like, well, do you have to read all that to understand Vampirella? So what I wanted to do was just kind of sweep the board and get back to basics. I wanted to get back to where we were, to the simpler stories, and it's more fun and that kind of thing. And I was like, well, how can we do that? And I was like, well, what if we just kind of do to Vampirella what Reggie did to be on Panther, where it's like my Panther ends with whatever number that was, and then Reggie and JR there on Panther #1, and it's the same, but it's totally different. So we're going back to where we began and it's back to that simpler time and this simpler set of characters and situations, except that aren't some of these people dead? Why are we here? How did we get here? Wait a minute, see, Vampirella is, the way I explain Vampirella to the uninitiated is I bring up a 1960s cartoon called Casper the Friendly Ghost. Now, many people have never seen this cartoon, so bear with me, but it's about this, it's just this kid, and he wants what we all want. He wants community, he wants family, he wants friends, he wants love in his life. He wants someone to play with. The only problem is he's a dead baby, and that's creepy. So right. He meets people and he befriends people and he's doing these benevolent things, but at some point they realize he's a ghost, and they always go, "You're a ghost," and they run away, and it's heartbreaking. It's this poor kid, he can't catch a break, and to me that's Vampirella. Vampirella wants community, love. She wants purpose. She wants a fulfilling job. She wants an apartment in the city. She wants what everybody wants, but she happens to be a vampire from outer space, and that's creepy. So she has these complications. She's got this mother who is patterned a lot after Endora from Bewitched. She's this very sort of gregarious, mischievous, semi-evil mischief mom who's meddling all the time, and then she's grown this whole rogues gallery full of enemies who will not let her exist in peace. In our series, at some point, to give you an example, because her mother wanted to spend time with her mother marooned Vampirella on a barren planet where they were stuck there for 8 months. And it was this bizarre circumstance and blah, blah, blah. But at some point, Vampirella realized, no, you did this on purpose. And she's yelling at her mom, and her mom is like, well, this is the only way I can get to spend time with you. That's the kind of thing where circumstances keep intruding on her pursuit of the very things that Omar and Priest are looking for, in our own lives. So I wanted to get back to that simpler narrative, but with a twist, because we've now literally returned to the beginning of our of Ergun and my run of our interpretation of Vampirella. We are now back at the beginning. We have brought these characters back. Some characters who have died are now back to life. Some of these
Mhm.
relationships that had been broken have been restored. Vampirella got married in issue 25. Turned out that guy may or may not have been Dracula. So there's some weirdness there. That has been restored. She's happily married. She's got a good job. She's got a good her friends are there. She's got a great life now, except none of this feels right because it's not right. It's clearly not right because those issues that we did actually did happen. But it takes her a while to kind of wake up to the fact that something's wrong here. And the point of this story arc is once Vampirella, it takes her a while to figure it out. But once she realizes that she's living more or less in an alternate timeline or in an altered timeline, or however you want to look at it, the question becomes, is she willing to give all this up in order to set things right? And what's at stake if she does not? So it's a really fun, interesting story that hopefully, if we did it right, will lurch from good humor and this kind of human interest stuff that Brian K. Vaughan does so much better than I do, and will lurch into this horrific stuff and into poignancy and loss and things like that. So it's a really I'm just having a blast, and we're hip deep in it by now. We're for the first time in our lives way ahead of schedule. So we will
What
ship on time,
when
and
you say
it's gorgeous stuff. Go ahead.
well,
Sorry.
really quick, when you say ahead of schedule, thank you, Jack Barry Dave and Maddie finally buffed on moonlighting. That's what he was talking about. So when you say you're ahead of schedule, how
Yes.
without because I know we don't know, and I don't want to mess anything up, but is there more after 666 for Christopher Priest on
God, I
Vampirella?
hope so.
Okay.
Now that's a Nick Barucci question.
It's an Iburuchi question.
You
Okay, I
know,
want to put him on the spot if he's still here. But I
my
was
my
just
understanding is that we are back in the saddle and we are ongoing, but a
okay.
lot of that really depends on the market. So it depends on the people listening to this podcast. So that's why I want you to post these sample pages.
Well, I
Um,
promised you I would. As soon as I get them from you, I'll
that
be happy to share on our social media.
I just want people to get a look at it, just to kind of get a sample of it, and then if you go, not for me, that's fine, But if you're just blowing us off because she's on the cover in a bikini and she's got a skull, well, that she's a vampire. What do you want from me? I have no control over what's on the cover, But it's a great. I think we've had a lot of fun doing this book, and Ergun is. Man, he's such a delight to work with, and just the stuff this guy comes up with is just it makes you laugh, it makes you cry. He just does a great job.
And I think this is an excellent question to kind of bring it to a close. How long could you see yourself writing Vampirella? And aren't you glad that Nick bugged you for so long to write it? Because now here you are excited to talk about issue 666. But yeah,
Well,
how long do you see yourself writing it?
well, that's a good question. I really don't know. I hadn't given it. I think as long as it's fun, like with 666. Um, I think I was finishing up Rage. I knew what we were doing with Rage. Rage is a whole different tone. Rage is like six uh one-off stories where like there was this TV show called Then Came Bronson. I'm really dating myself now. Welcome to the 70s. But there was a show called Then Came Bronson, and this guy rides into town on a motorcycle and he has this adventure and then he rides out of town and the credits roll, And then we come back next week and he rides into another town and he has an adventure and he does whatever and then he rides out and then the credits roll, So that's Rage. Rage, it's like she's tracking down these people who have done her this grievous harm. But every issue is a little vignette about a group of people we've never met before at a specific circumstance. So it's a very different series for us, where she is has arrived in this particular area and is dealing with these particular people, and she has this adventure, and then she rides out of town, and blah blah, that kind of thing. So all along, when I was finishing up Rage and thinking about, well, what's the next thing after that, it wasn't until I can't, I knew I wanted to go back to basics. I wanted to get it simpler. I wanted to, to get rid of a lot of the, complexity that we had layered on and get back to what we are doing. I didn't know exactly how until this idea occurred to me. And then, it's like every issue that I was writing of the new series that starts with 666, every issue I was just delighted and I was just having a blast, and I think I wrote this like a little more than a year ago. I mean,
Wow.
I started this a long time ago, and I was just, Omar, I was giggling my face off. I was like, oh, this is fun. I
So as
hope the
long as
readers
you're having fun is the
I
key.
hope the readers think it's fun too, because I was having a blast doing it. And then the art came in and it was just hilarious. I went, oh wow, he's really getting into it. I get it now.
Okay, dang it! I know we've been going over for 2 hours, but I did want to ask you, Mr. Priest, which character would you like to write for that you haven't written yet? And then, it's a good question for the big two or anybody, Jack. Then I
I
want
don't
to
think
connect
there
with this one.
I don't think there is a character that I wanted to write that I haven't written. Um, I've said over and over again that I would really like to be like the Batman writer of record. I would really like to be the Iron Man writer of record. And every time a slot opens up for those jobs, my phone doesn't ring. So I'm not mad about it. I have a very specific approach to this genre, and some people like it, some people don't. And it's not my job to second guess the market. That's the editor's job. So I never take it personally when I don't get a gig. But those were two books that I've just been waiting around to write. I feel really blessed that I finally got a chance to write Superman. Thank you, DC Comics, for that opportunity. And I think we're doing a really good job with that book. I will give a lot of credit to my artist, Carlo Pagulayan. I'll give a lot of credit to Mike Carlin, who is uncredited because he wasn't allowed to be credited because he worked in the TV department. But
Oh,
but
okay.
Carlin was one of those legendary Superman editors, and a longtime friend of mine, and I was the one who kind of helped him get into the business in the first place. So he owes me. But Carlin has spent hour after hour on the phone teaching me who Superman is and helping me, holding my hand through the process. So big thank you to him. So yeah, I got a couple things on the bucket list, but I've never really had like a Batman run or an Iron Man run, and I sure would like one.
I think a lot of us would like for you to have Iron Man. My goodness, why not? Yeah. You are always welcome to come back, by the way, because I would love to keep talking to you about that stuff. This is a good
Okay.
question because I was curious about the inspiration for this, but you are the one that created the idea of the Dora Milaje, right?
Yes.
For the Black Panther run,
Yes.
and of course that was what was used in the movies too. But
Yes.
what was the inspiration for it? Great question.
Okay, so the Dora Milaje, as they appear in the film, are based on Ta-Nehisi Coates and Brian Stelfreeze on their interpretation, because they kind of patterned them after these female armies
Steel
that
Freeze, phenomenal
uh,
artist.
yeah. They patterned them after these historical tribal women armies that the women warriors, the women king, we saw that film based on.
Mhm.
My interpretation of the Dora Milaje is I saw them as nuns, as a religious order, um, and each one of the Dora Milaje would represent one of these tribes, and they were created because I kept wondering how is it that this one country was so unique on the continent that that it hadn't devolved into tribal warfare or been conquered by the Europeans and so forth. And I thought, aha, what if there was some sort of brilliant solution where all the tribes were held in tension by selecting a representative who would serve the king as kind of like, this is a candidate to become the queen. These are wives in waiting, the Dora Milaje, except that he could never actually consummate a relationship with any one of them, because to choose one of them would mean that he's rejecting the others, and then Wakanda would devolve into tribal warfare. So in the comic book, in the movie, he's clearly having a relationship with this operative named Nakia. In the comic book, Nakia was one of the Dora Milaje, and Mephisto created this hallucination where T'Challa mistook her for Monica Lynn, his love interest, and he gives her a big smooch, and that just sends Nakia, the Dora Milaje, off the deep end, because she thinks, oh, I've been chosen. I'm one of the chosen ones. And when he comes out, he goes, no, you're not one of the chosen ones. So now she feels rejected, and she goes off the chain and becomes the villain known as Malice. So she becomes his Catwoman. Whether that actually ever happens in the film franchise or not, you have to stay tuned, because they never tell me anything. But yeah, we had, Ta-Nehisi evolved a lot of the concepts, in a smart way, because he's so much smarter than I am. And I'm not being facetious. He is so much smarter than I am. This guy is just so brilliant. And he really just brought stuff to the table that I had never even thought of that way before. And I was very grateful to see how he did it and what he brought to it.
Thank you so much for taking the time to answer that. And a big thank you for being on the show and taking all of these questions and my questions. And you are always welcome to come back, talk about whatever you're currently working on. And as soon as I get those pages from you, I can definitely share that on social media to show people what little taste of what Vampirella is like. That comes out on February 7th, 2024. Big thank you to Nick. And I'll ask Nick a little more questions about the collection of Vampirella with Christopher Priest's name on it. That would be amazing. But yeah, I'll ask him a little more questions, more detailed questions about that through email.
And I will adjust my lighting. So
you will for the next time.
Okay. I'll get the lighting fixed. Yeah.
But big thank you for being here, and thank you for everybody that tuned in. Don't forget to hit that like button. Check out Vampirella coming out in February. Check out any of Christopher Priest's work. It's very accessible. It's like he's got a huge body of work, not just at the big two, but also independent companies, Valiant and now at Dynamite. But definitely
Superman Lost. Go get Superman Lost.
There you go. The
first knockdown, the issue on sale now, knockdown drag out fight between Superman and Lois. I've never seen them have a fight. Have you?
No, sir, I have not.
He's pissed at her because she's done something really stupid. Well, I don't want to say it because now the women go, "What do you mean she did something stupid?" Anyway, this is what delights me, is just making the editors very nervous. But yeah, big Superman fight with his wife. Go see that.
Okay. There it is. And thank you everybody again. Thank you all so much, and you all have a wonderful night. And I will